we have Matt Ater, who is the Vice President for Vispero. Then we have Mike May, who's the Chief of Analyst for Google Maps. And then third, we have Troy Otillio, who is the CEO of Aira, and it's A-I-R-A. Let's start with Troy.
Good afternoon, everyone. As everyone said, it's just great to be here. It's great to see people across the table. And for those who are on Zoom, I wish you guys could be here because obviously it's very it's more engaging in person. But thanks for everyone for taking the time to show up. I was thinking about what we could talk about in terms of accessible travel. Jake gave a little bit of information about how Aira works, but just in case, to make it really clear, in fact, both Mike and Matt could probably describe it better because they actually use the service. I operate it, but we have over 200 trained professional agents who sit, they work from home and they're using Aira technology to receive calls from people who are going about their daily lives and sometimes need more visual information.
And Troy, in fact, if I was, at any other event, I would put on my headphones here. It's got a little microphone. I'd tap the Aira button on my phone and I'd call up and I'd get an agent and they could see what my camera's seen. I could point it over here and I'd say, what does this guy look like?
In fact, it's interesting you say that, Mike. I went to a conference and it had a little show after the event where somebody did a bunch of dancing and acrobatics on the floor, and there was no description to me, so I just there's a feature in Aira where you can message an agent without talking because I didn't want to interrupt everybody around me, and so I texted the agent and then they described to me in my ear everything that was happening in front of me, which allowed me to participate just like anybody else and enjoy the experience.
And so for Aira, Aira's a great platform, and I think it's relevant for travel because we get used in travel. In fact, some people always ask, well, how do you guys make money? How does Aira work? We did start as a subscription service where individuals would pay for monthly access, but we soon found that there was an appetite for businesses and organizations to purchase Aira for their customers. And I think Jake had on the slide, we're very proud to be working with Starbucks at over 17,000 locations. So at any Starbucks, when Mike or Matt or any of the thousands of Aira users, we call explorers, are near a Starbucks or they want to find a Starbucks, they can use our app. And when they get within the proximity to that Starbucks, that call is attributed to Starbucks. So Starbucks is paying for the call. Since we launched our access service 3 years ago, we've grown to have about 180 organizations who purchase Aira for either their employees or for customers. Another great example is Target. So any Target store, as well as even on their website. So most companies do a good job at trying to address accessibility. At Aira, we see people who call in who are finding little glitches in the website, whether it's a CAPTCHA or a drop-down that's not labeled, a table layout that's not labeled. We see those calls every day by the thousands. And we know some of them are sites where accessibility is a focus, yet defects come in, yet there are issues. And so Target also covers their website, even though they do seek and deliver on an accessible website. So I can talk a little bit today about why these companies are purchasing Aira. And I think Jake started off by saying that, we're in a bit of we got a nice tailwind right now. I think whether it's the events, whether you look at COVID or Black Lives Matters or a lot of the chaos that's out there, there's a lot of companies that are looking to do something meaningful about accessibility. In the case with Aira, of course, we're talking about blind and visually impaired, but I think that appetite is out there. And it's really about how can you simplify it for them? How can you give them confidence that it's not going to backfire? There's a lot of companies that when they look at doing something new, the first thing they think about is well, how could this blow up in my face? How could this be is this company Aira or any other company, are they trusted by their audience? And so at Aira, we take that very seriously, whether it's privacy or the way we behave on the public stage, to make sure that we listen and we make sure that, our brand is one that is about independence and not creating dependence. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited, obviously with Starbucks, and then I'll give you guys a scoop. And then maybe Matt or Mike want to say some things, but the scoop for you guys today is that starting next month, the entire state of Connecticut will be providing Aira access to their citizens or anyone who visits the state. And this is
Wow.
specifically for transportation or essential services. So this isn't for everything. Matt isn't going to be able to have his outdoor scene described for free. But if you're
That's an essential service, though.
yeah, that's the Matt service. That's a
I mean,
private service for Matt. But anyway, we're very excited, and I think we're finding success at this message of it's really a quality message, and it's a message that you can do something. There's things you can do, like Jake, you brought up, whether it's adjusting the tension on your door. There are things you can do. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. With Aira, you can deploy in hours. I mean, it takes us way longer to get through security and a bunch of other things that precede the actual turning on of the service. But at the end of the day, it's something meaningful and does make a difference for people who want that information.
And Troy, I can add to this. So our company makes, as was mentioned, JAWS for Windows and other assistive devices that blind and low vision people use for, like I have one on my desk here. It's a braille display, so I can feel what's on the screen of my phone. Mike uses one similar. And we invest in Aira both for our employees. So all of our blind and low vision employees around the world get access to Aira. And then we additionally partner with them so that if one of our customers who's blind or low vision can obviously call our tech support, but my tech support agents are blind. So if the computer's not talking at the time that they call my tech support agents, they have a hard time supporting that person. It could, something could be broken, the speakers could be unplugged, the computer may not even be on. If you called an Aira agent and said you're working with our software, then we cover that and pay Aira for supporting our customers. So there's a great partnership that organizations used Aira to help read the instructions to put it together and walked me through picking out, the 50 screws that you have to put together to put this thing together. There was no way I was going to be able to read the manual and figure it out. And those agents did all of that with me. And obviously that's not workplace, but still it's the benefit they gave me to be able to perform that task.
Okay, so Mike, can you talk a little bit about Good Maps and what you do?
Yeah, love to. I've been working on accessible navigation for 25 years, but working on independent travel my whole life. So if you're not good at something by the time you're my age, after working on your whole life, there's something wrong. The fact is that we have visual acuity that usually determines you're blind or you're low vision, but I think of life acuity. And life acuity is really all about how much you get out and about and how you do things. And for a blind person, that's all about things that are visual. Signs are visual, maps are visual. So how do you become active? How do you have good life acuity unless you deal with those visual signs? So all of us up here have tools, and there are many more than are represented by us that deal with that life acuity with those visual signs. So picture all the print signs put away if you had to navigate it as a sighted person. The complete trip for me, starting at home, getting on a website, booking flights, getting to the airport on rideshare, getting through security, to the gate, on the plane, finding the restroom. Never can find the darn toilet flushers in those airport bathrooms. They're not consistent.
And who wants to touch them?
Who wants to feel around? Then you get to your connecting flight. You gotta find your way there. The meet and greet people may or may not be there to help you out. The problems, it's a challenge through a whole, so 12 hours yesterday for us getting from Sacramento, Davis, California to this hotel was quite the project. And then when we arrive, we come into the hotel and we ask the front desk, and she tells us about the elevator. and shows us where it is and goes in and she says, well, what's your room number, your floor number? So there's a touch screen. And I said, wait a second. You're not going to be with us this whole visit. So how am I going to find it? And she said, oh, there's a keypad down here. Well, turns out that keypad doesn't act like a normal phone keypad where you floor 22 is type in 22. No, doesn't work. There's an accessibility button at the bottom. You push it, it talks. And then it does this annoying thing where it says 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you're on the 22nd floor, you got to wait till it counts to 22. And then you hit the button.
You better hit it quick.
And it selects your floor. It's crazy making. Then you find your room. And so it goes on. So we go back down to get dinner. And this is where Good Maps comes in. We figured if we look really lost, and you learn how to do that as a blind person, look really lost, somebody will come up to you and help you. Nobody came up. Everybody was busy talking and drinking, the few people that are around. It wasn't that crowded. So we spent 10 minutes in that lobby trying to find where things were. I go to the front desk and she says, well, here's how you get to the restaurant. Her directions weren't very good. We'll come to that in the next presentation. But the bottom line was, wouldn't it be wonderful if that place was mapped? If I could do it independently. We don't always have a sighted person with us. We don't always have an Aira with us. Not everybody has a subscription and so forth. So how can we do that independently? And when there are tools and mechanisms for doing that, it's a shame when people don't use them. I mean, blind people have been getting around independently since James Holman in 1820, but that doesn't mean we have to do it strictly with sighted assistance. The technology that we have at Good Maps is simply a matter of LiDAR and a camera. I could walk through this convention center with a LiDAR backpack and map it in 3 or 4 hours. That map can then be referenced by the app on my phone. And instead of having to ask, and we were with a sighted person.
You mean even just getting here?
Getting here, bless our souls, these sighted people are useful for something. They can read signs. And so Troy found us the way here, but we weren't with Troy, and we ask other people, and you know what they usually say? I'm not from here. Even when they're perfectly sighted and you want to shake them and say, it doesn't matter, just use your eyeballs and scan around. We could have gotten here independently with this facility being mapped. So that's what I'm really encouraging people out there to look at, is when you have the capability to make your facility accessible by signing up for Aira or by implementing Good Maps in your indoor space, it's a travesty if you don't do it.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other thing that's a problem is when you want an accessible kiosk, right, Matt?
Well, yeah, but I'll say, I want to comment to your thing about, I'm not from here. My favorite is when they come up to me with a cane and say, can you give me directions to the bathroom?
Oh, I love that.
And I look at them and I'm like, I can, and I will.
So Matt, why don't we go to Vispero and buy Jaws?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everybody for having us, and great to be here. This is the first time I've been here. Jake and I spoke back at probably the day the country shut down. I think it was probably March 13, 2020. And our company makes technology primarily what users would use to, if they're blind or low vision, to read something, whether it's, reading something that's technology on a computer or reading it paper and make it print big enough so that a low vision person can read it. And there's lots of devices and lots of brands underneath our umbrella of Vispero, but one of them is Jaws. And several years ago, we were approached by Wells Fargo to basically make not their ATMs accessible, but their internet cafe-like. They're not cafe, you can't just go do your Gmail at these places. But if you need to do your banking, you could walk into the Wells Fargo and do your banking on a computer, because the assumption is not everybody has a computer at home. So that was our first step into kiosks as we would branch into it. And eventually, we're in, over I think 20,000 kiosks in the United States today. And the biggest press release will be in the next day or so, which is McDonald's. So outside in the hallway, you'll see a McDonald's kiosk. It's a small one. It's the mini version. You won't find this, and it's not going to deliver your food. I apologize, but you can play with it. But when you think about travel, it's also things like JAWS is on all the Carnival cruise ships, so that if a blind person wants to use the internet cafe, they can do that. Some of the other things that they may want to do, which doesn't have JAWS on it today, but would love to do, is I'd like to get my bill printed. I'd like to read my bill ahead of time. I don't necessarily want to ask somebody at the front desk to read the bill out loud to me to make sure everything's right. Does everybody in the lobby need to know what I drank last night? Probably not.
Don't want to know.
No. And so, we believe this is a level of independence. And what's beautiful about what we have here on stage today is, Troy and Mike and I have been talking about this, is that, okay, so I can make an accessible kiosk, and I'm not making the hardware, I'm putting software on an existing Windows computer. But how would a blind person know it's even there? Right? 99% of the kiosks in the world today are not accessible. So how would they know? They need to be told. And it can't just say, oh, there's something with a headphone jack over here, and that's enough, right? So, can Aira, as an example, have the data, not just for that Starbucks or sites where you can go get that, but they could host the content to say there's an accessible kiosk at this McDonald's, or Good Maps could map that. On the Carnival cruise ship is if I go through the cruise ship, and how do I know which of those internet cafes is accessible? Not all of them, right? It's a big ship. There's 13 floors. There's lots of people. Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of what we're talking about here on stage. Isn't just one solution, but multiple solutions that in the end, there's some real value in the blind traveler to have access to things they want to do. And people always say, well, you could just go to the counter to order from McDonald's, and you could, but there's a big menu.
And that ties into Sasha's Google database. Same thing. If we have an accessibility flag that tells us something useful is there in the context of, I'm going around with my Good Maps and it's telling me directions. And oh, by the way, you passed an accessible kiosk. Boom, there you go.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about those menus is I can tell you right now that if I asked my wife to read the menu to me, I would get a filtered down version of the menu, what she wants me to eat. And it's very similar to having somebody read you the newspaper, right, Mike? I mean, when the kinds of things people read on the newspaper to you, this is why we like digital. We like to be able to control our own destiny. We want to read everything ourselves to give us that pleasure of being able to capture. Maybe you do. She's not listening, right? Maybe you do want to eat that Big Mac. She didn't hear that.
So let's just talk about the future of blind travel. So you all have products basically that can help travelers, and that's why you're here. And we're really grateful that you're here. But I'd like to ask you to look into your crystal ball based on the events you go to, the things you read, and basically what you're hearing to talk about the future of blind travel, because because a lot of the technology companies, I mean, if you look at Apple and Facebook and Google and some of the major technology companies, they have great technology basically and tools that can be used. So anyway, we'll start with you, Matt. And what's great about Matt's product, which is a kiosk, it's not a kiosk, it's actually software for a kiosk that can be used in any visitor center. So what I saw the application is really for visitors, basically at a visitor center or a welcome center that has a kiosk, and it would be available for people who are blind. Can you talk a little bit about what you see in terms of the future for that type of product, for your type of product, and other things that you're seeing?
Yeah, and when you go out and look in the kiosk industry, which I was not part of, right? I'm running business development and software for a company. But when I go out there into these markets, you see all kinds of crazy innovation from you guys see it every day. You can do self-checkout at the store. And I always laugh. It's like the guy who's checking out says, well, why am I paying you for a little extra for the person to work behind the counter? And now I have to book. Wait, do I get paid to check myself out now? That's always the joke with self-checkout. But when you look at, hotels and airports today, there's less and less people to interact with. Going into the airport the other day, I went up to the Clear kiosk and I put my fingers on it and it says I'm cleared to go through. That's an experience that's not accessible today. A blind person couldn't use it. Most likely, I didn't see whether or not there was a wheelchair height version of it either. The Clear kiosk looked pretty far up off the ground. Same with, passport control when you're going through the airports today. You can do all of that with a kiosk. Those aren't accessible today. You can go to a hotel and check in. Not all of them, but there's hotels out there that have these kiosks now. You could check out. I mean, heck, Troy over here has a wristband. That's an accessibility thing that nobody thought about. Like if this wristband, he walks up to his door and puts it up like he's magic and it opens the door. He didn't have to pull a key out of his pocket to do it. Those are the accessibility things that I think continue to grow, that can be good for not just sighted people, but disabled people or not just blind people, but other disabilities as well. And then other non-sighted people. So I think the convenience of kiosks are just going to continue to grow because under COVID, we said, oh, we don't want to touch anything. We don't want to talk to anybody. So now there's this talk to them. So I have an app out there on the kiosk. If you wanted to see it, it's a slot machine. You can walk up and say, spin. And then Jaws will come back and said, you lost. Put more money in the machine. Spin. More money. Spin. Oh, we have it calculated. We're going to take all your money before we give it. But those, now, so voice, it should spot that you're standing in front of it, and then you could talk to it. Now, there's a lot of processing when you start talking to something because it needs to go up to the cloud, and some kiosks are offline, so they don't want it to go to the cloud because of security. But natural language processing usually happens in the cloud, not locally on the machine. So that's the kind of stuff I would see that the explosion of kiosks will continue to go. And then the part that I like is I think the voice input part is going to come because people don't want to touch these things.
So the question I had for Troy, can anybody sign up for Aira as a civilian?
You mean as someone who's sighted or
Yeah.
just, yeah,
No.
So we have a range of users. We have plenty, some people that have full vision. Like it's just, if you think about it, having someone with the power of the internet at their fingertips who is trained and is very efficient with communicating information is just a powerful tool to have. We see other use cases. We're proud to say that Amazon is now a customer of Aira, and they've hired about 50 or 60 people with blind or low vision to work in their fulfillment centers. And Aira is part of the toolkit that makes that possible. And now they're looking into other use cases for more like neural diversity. So, whether you're dyslexic or maybe you're slower to access information, we're experimenting to see if another human, because we're a human to human service, to see if having a second person who's available for certain tasks, makes for a more efficient or lower stress environment. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of things you can do with a human to human service, right? That we haven't discovered yet.
So, I attended CSUN, which is where I met Matt, and Mike was there, and I think you were there as well. And so that's a window to the future, isn't it, of what's out there? So what did you see? Because I know there are things like watches, and CSUN is mainly around products for people who are blind. And just but I was going to ask you, what did, for each of you, what do you see that's on the horizon that might help blind people in their travel experience?
I'll take a crack at it. There's what I see coming both at a business level and a technology level is kind of a nice little supporting loop. So you think about those Amazon employees, right, who now have a job, you think about the expectation. There's lots of different stats to quote, like one that is typically accepted is that there's 70% unemployment in this audience. And, one of Aira's missions is to change that for the better. But as technology makes more things possible, like good maps and like LiDAR mapping, I think the expectation grows, and it should grow, right? Like we're all here because our expectations are high. But when the population of people, let's say broadly with disabilities, when their expectations become higher, and then certain brands like a Starbucks or a Target embrace a solution, I think, and then in our social media rich world, I think that's creating real value both for the business as well as the individual. So as technology makes more things possible, I think it's like going air, water, food. Like website accessibility is air, right? It should be there. When it's not there, you're really just denying your customer, service. And but then, like we even see with our Aira users, they'll start by using it for very simple but important things, and then they end up mastering their navigation route, and they don't need Aira anymore. But what they use Aira for then is maybe more, what you might call water or food, entertainment. Like, please describe for me what my child is doing on the playground, right? That's something they might not start with because they want to retain as many minutes for themselves. So I see this, as technology makes more things possible, I think expectations go up. And I also think, as businesses, destinations embrace more accessible technology or services, then I think all of us, sighted or not, will see that and embrace it more and expect it more often.
Okay, so is Aira international or is it just domestic right now?
Right now, it's in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. We are adding Spanish language support. So that'll allow us to go into other markets. And the goal is to put it wherever anyone can find value.
So let me ask you again this question about the future. And this is, are there products other than the three of your products that you see in the future that are tools or technology or actually just sort of practical innovations that will help people that are not related to the three of you?
If I could take a stab at it, I think one is, and we've seen the movement here over the last several years, but it's self-driving cars. Troy mentioned workplace accommodations, but the facts are it's very difficult, depending on where you live, to get to work if you're blind, because we don't drive. Now here in Tampa, they have, the I think it's called DART or something like that. I'm not sure what it's called.
Yeah, they have a
here.
tram. Yeah.
No, I'm talking, it's like a public service for people who are blind to ride a vehicle to school, to work. So in each city, big cities have this. Not all small cities do. Not all states have it. Rural areas wouldn't have it. And so the cost for a person to take a car ride to something, and Uber and Lyft prices have gone up, since the pandemic, because there's, supply and demand. And so, not everybody can do that. And I think that self-driving cars someday is a win-win. I've done testing of them. I love it. I think it's awesome. And I think the wave of the future is going to be something like that. And I think transportation is one of the barriers that blind people have today, and getting to and from things.
Well, certainly transportation and employment are two key things. You can't travel unless you can get there and unless you have the money to get there. So travel all ties back to these things, to the air that Troy is talking about. We need to have employment. And so as we have more people having visual jobs where like at Amazon, or like my wife, who's a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley, that's a highly visual job. You can't do that without some visual assistance at the moment. I think the future is already here. So when I came here from California, I probably used 8-10 different apps / services to get here. Most blind people don't want to go to the trouble of that And if it's too much trouble, they're not going to leave home.
Mhm.
So the future is here in that when we can integrate these different apps and services so they work together, the kiosks, the Aira, the Uber, the airline apps, the Expedia booking of the apps, when all of these things happen in a more intelligent way, then people are going to just think of it as, oh, that's just my travel service.
Mhm.
And I just hit go and it helps me through the whole process. That's why I say the future is here. We can do all of this stuff. Not everybody's motivated to put it together. What can we do to make it easier to integrate these applications?
And by the way, Mike is filmed in the movie Planes, Trains and Automobiles for yesterday's travel experience. So
So, Mike, can you identify the 8 different apps or services that you use to get here?
Yeah, so I use, I get on Expedia because it's the best travel app to actually tell you which airlines. Then I pick the airline. I'm sorry, Expedia, I don't always book on your app. I call up the airline because I'm a 1K in United. I try to go on that airline. So then they help me book the flight. Then I'm using the United app to check in and to follow my my travel along the way. I'm booking both Uber and Lyft because I don't know which one's going to come. So I schedule both of them and then cancel the one that doesn't come. Then I get to the airport and I'm looking at connecting flight information. I don't usually use the meet and greet service, but that's an option. And then out the other end, it's the same thing where I will call up Aira if I need some help. A lot of times I get to the gate and I want to know, I've got plenty of time. What do I do? What's around here? I want to go shopping. What restaurants are here? Do I need to look up a menu? And then I go out the other end and it's find the Uber, and I might be able to book it on the app, but then I need Aira to help me identify the car. So we can find each other because rideshare is based on the fact that the driver thinks you can see them. All the way here to the hotel and then checking in. I might check in remotely and have a mobile key on the Marriott app. And then of course, there's all those missing pieces that don't exist yet, like totally accessible escalators, thermostats in the hotel room. The TVs are not usually accessible. So there are a few places for improvement, but by and large, if somebody could make those things all talk to each other, that would be ideal.
and I mean, I've had a room here in Clearwater that had, Alexa in the room. Well, it's great because I can listen to the news and those kind of things. But they could have connected that to all of the devices in the room. They had a fan, they had the thermostat, and that's an example of where you could get things more connected, right, Mike? I mean,
Amen. Yeah.
Nothing's worse than the alarm clock that goes off at 4 a.m. in your hotel room because the kid the day before set it for you. And so I can't use the alarm clocks in the hotel rooms. I'd rather use the Alexa. Now, most of us carry a smartphone and we just do it with that, and that's fine too.
So anyway, I wanted to see if there are any questions from the audience. Anyone?
If you get a good question, I'll get you a cheeseburger in that kiosk out there. Just kidding.
And-
Just kidding.
And by the way, in terms of these things being successful from a business standpoint, anytime we have either multiple disabilities using an application or the general population, it makes them cheaper and more likely to be updated. And I'm a big fan of working with our friends at Open Doors, looking at, well, where are there things that blind people and people with wheelchairs have in common, or we can rally together. And one of my favorite that Eric came up with when we were brainstorming was we go into a store. I didn't realize that when you're in a wheelchair, of course, you're sitting low. So you have a hard time and signs are being blocked from you as well. So having good maps in a store would be helpful because you're getting that navigation. And a lot of times you want a customer service person. So is there some way we can have an Aira type service that connects me to the customer service department in that target store that I'm in, so I can get a person to either come help me or to answer my question on the fly? And that really came from that discussion of looking at how do we deal with things that help both people in a wheelchair and people who are blind.
And you should
Yes.
see, and I'll say to comment to that real quick, and then take that question. The kiosks, we're putting keypads on them because they're not just for people who are blind or low vision, but somebody with a motor disability may not be able to interact with the touch screen. So they have a key press they can do. That's one other kind of component that I think that's important.
Mhm.
Yeah, hello, I'm a travel agent, and my question is, especially like with Sasha's, was working with people that bringing them informational as guides. When you mentioned about the LiDAR
Mapping.
mapping, thank you. Have you worked with the cruise lines or all-inclusive resorts or hotels to, map the map? I mean, that would be great for when I'm sending a blind person to an all-inclusive resort or a cruise line. The app doesn't tell me everywhere on the ship or go left, go right, go here, go there. Is that an option if we get you the right people to talk to? Will you go
Amen.
in and do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do that. We've had some initial conversations with cruise lines. But on a 14-floor ship, it is confusing and there aren't a lot of straight lines or hallways. And so having some independent navigation would be absolutely fantastic.
And I would also add the cruise ports. They're so confusing and so difficult to navigate, and everybody's in a rush. I mean, have you guys been on a cruise before? It's chaos the day getting on that cruise ship. And unless you paid a little extra, then you could skip the line. But I highly, think that those are other areas of interest that I would have.
Thank you very much. This was a great group with terrific insights and stories behind them.